Hey guys, Tim Starnes here from Cinesamples. In the previous video, I talked about the basic premise of corrective EQ. In this tutorial and in following ones, I'll give specific examples of each instrument group. I'm focusing on one particular mixing situation, MIDI production using sample libraries in the orchestral and film score genre. Live recording presents different EQ problems, and if I live long enough, I'll eventually cover that in another tutorial. Sample libraries are recorded by many companies in many different spaces by different musicians. The sound of one library is often quite different from another. But many film scores were recorded in the same manner with the engineer as the common element. So that's a common situation. The goal is to equalize all of the sample stems in order to create a cohesive, homogeneous mix in which each element sounds like it belongs with the others. This is not to imply that certain sample libraries were not produced or recorded well. We're simply making slight adjustments so our chosen libraries will all fit together as one mix. I often like to think of a mix as a captured live performance. Instruments in an acoustic space respond to the laws of acoustics. One key phenomenon that's good to be aware of is the proximity effect. It's a phenomenon that leads to an increase in low-frequency response as you move the mic closer to the source, or as instruments move closer to us. The increase includes all bass frequencies, but is generally centered between 100 and 200 Hz. When mixing, we can increase or decrease the sense of proximity of an instrument using EQ. Here's a demonstration with the aid of ProQ's graph. I'll begin talking 3 meters away from my microphone and gradually walk toward the mic until I'm about 3 centimeters from the capsule. Notice the increase in low-frequency energy, particularly between 100 and 200 Hz as I move closer to the microphone. Now 3 meters away from the microphone, 2.5 meters, 2 meters, 1.5 meters, now 1 meter, 3/4 of a meter, half a meter, 1/4 of a meter, 10 centimeters, 5 centimeters, now 3 centimeters. So let's start with percussion. Here's an example of stems only. Nothing added, no EQ, no dynamics, no reverb. Purely a stem playback. Let's start exploring just the percussion alone. I recommend grouping them all together so that you can just listen to percussion by itself. Most of these samples came from PERC, from our Cinesymphony series, and also from Deep Percussion Beds. Let's take a listen to some of the sections. It develops even more here. And then even more down here. All right, great. Now let's explore some frequency ranges, key frequency ranges for each instrument. Cymbals. So I'm going to turn on my auto gain compensation as usual. Anywhere down in here, you're going to find all this body, especially around 200 through until about 1K. And then you start getting into an edgy quality, approaching 2K. Above 2K, 2 to 3. And then 4 is where it starts getting a bit irritating in the ears. And then sometimes certain cymbal samples can be a little too much in this frequency range. And then above 5 is where you get the real sizzle. Above 8 and 10, that's when you get the angel dust. So just keep all that in mind for basic frequency ranges. Doesn't seem to be anything inherently wrong with this particular one. Same with this other one. Darker cymbals. Okay, I'm going to move on to this third track of the percussion on a dole, and that's deeper percussion. Might be considered a mid-range kind of a percussion. And as you can see visually, there's not a whole lot going on below 100 for sure, but Let's raise it to see what it sounds like. Yeah, it's a little warmer. As we move up the scale, we can hear it gets even warmer. And as we approach 200, it's starting to get a little boxy. So just keep in mind, 2 to 3 to 400 is a kind of a boxy area. A lot of instruments can build up around here, a lot of energy. Just keep that in mind. There's a rather unique sound around 1K. 2K. 3. Got a rather edgy sound right here. And now we're getting into the transients at this point between 4 and 5. And of course above 6, then it just gets more air-like up in here. Okay. Next one is deep percussion beds. So this is a loop. All right. Listening to this, I hear a lot of information going on below 100. A lot of sub-information. And it's going very fast, very rapidly. Low frequency sub-information is really nice. It's very fat, it's very thick, but going on this fast, it'll really dirty and muddy up a track really fast. So here's 100. Pretty punchy, warm. Okay, 200. Now I'm in the boxy territory, for sure. Okay, now a pinched area. Now the transient area. And then above that, same with the air. Be careful, a lot of percussion can be also have a lot of energy around in here. That pinched tone is something to look out for. It's usually somewhere around 3K. All right, this does not have that though. All right, next is the Taiko. Yeah, sounds like a Taiko played around mezzo piano, mezzo forte-ish. Visually, I can see that information. Probably most prominent around 90. And yeah, there is some sub-information for sure. It's in there. But by default, I don't really hear a lot of it. Most of it's around here. Fundamental. First harmonic. And then it starts to get boxy. About 300 to 500 or so. Just keep listening to it as it goes up. Now we get into the transient territory. It has a nice attack up here if you want more attack. But above 6K, there's really not a whole lot of information. It's not really delivering a big difference. Maybe just a little bit of the stick on the head. That's about it. All right. Timpani. Timpani's a big one. Timpani, depending on the sample, can get really muddy in certain frequency ranges, probably 2 to 300 area. This one's okay. This is PERC. It was recorded pretty well. But this is what that muddiness can sound like. It's not exactly that. It has to be recorded improperly for the muddiness to appear. But there's the fundamental. Now the lower drums will deliver the sub information as well, the bigger drums. Probably not necessary. Now it's starting to sound boxy in the typical area, around 400. None of this is really useful until you get, that's again a pinched area. If you want more attack, probably this is a good area, but I'd widen out the Q so it doesn't sound pointed. So that will give you more attack if you need. Don't need it on this one though. Last track is another timpani, soft mallet. Okay, back to the full mix. Okay, I brought in a reference track. As I had mentioned in the previous video, reference tracks are very helpful. So you get kind of a center for your ears. This one's Avatar. It's a bit older, but it's pretty close to this material stylistically. Back to ours. Back to the ref. And back to ours. Okay, so the one thing I hear that sticks out to me the most is that the percussion's poking through a little bit. So we want to kind of push that back into the mix. There's so many ways of doing it. I realize that. But with EQ, that's what we're working on today. So let's listen to the percussion, the entire percussion soloed. And we'll start with a top track here. That's the deep percussion beds loop. Now the Taiko and the timpani. So I think it's pretty obvious what the culprit is for the high percussion and what's cutting through. The deep percussion bed. So let's open up an EQ on this. This is what I was experimenting with earlier. So let's try it. Without, and then engaged. Without, and then engaged. Now I'll play the entire group. Bypassed. Engaged. Okay, so let me show you how I got this. Let's start from 0. I'm hearing this particular range because if I go higher, then I'm only left with this pinched area right below it. But if I set this lower, I'm hearing all this air and sizzliness, you know, on above it. So I'm going to try to find that magic point in between. Yeah, something that sounds most natural. It's probably around 5K. So it's just now a matter of how much of it do I want to reduce. Okay, so I go back to the percussion choir or group. That sounds good. Now let's go back to the entire mix. That sounds about right. So my point is to check it within the choir or the group itself, then within the entire mix, and also solo. Next instrument, Taiko. We have the option of getting a little bit more cushion underneath this. This stuff below 60 Hertz. But before I do that, I'm going to just disable that for a moment. And I discovered a little low mid-range that I wanted to clear up. Bypassed. Engaged. Okay, now let's listen to it within the group. Bypassed. Engaged. I felt like this was competing with the timpani and then that of the deep percussion beds loop. All right, great. So that's pretty well balanced, but if I want more cushion, more low end, best place to get it is this Taiko. So that now engaged. Off. And on. And now within the full mix. Off. And you can decide how much of that you want. Great. Moving on to the next instrument, this dole. Listening to it in the Percussion Group. And now solo. That's got the upper mid-range attack. That's pretty good. Okay. But I also hear some boxiness. Okay. In the group. Tends to clear up a little bit of that boxiness. Now let me go back to solo and I'll show you why. That's exactly what I'm trying to reduce. If I set the frequency too high, I hear it coming underneath. Bringing it down, bringing it down too low, I start hearing that boxiness above it. So this seems to be the most ideal frequency, and then just decide how much. And you can do it also either in a group or in the full mix. Great. Now back to solo. Would be nice to have some more beef on this. Not too much, because it'll compete with the other instruments. So I'm thinking 1. There's nothing below here, so it would have to be around 100. And that is going to be too much, as you can hear. So something around 3. Sounds good. Back to the group. See? So much so that the automatic gain compensation causes the whole instrument to disappear. So maybe just a little bit. Great. And then in the full mix. Now, I'm going to mute all of these. Back in. There's the result. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, we've got a couple other percussion tracks as well in the session down here. Not necessarily orchestral percussion, they're drum kit tracks. I'll show you what they sound like soloed. So kick, snare, hat, cymbals, and so forth. It picks up more in here. This drum track is a live recording. Listening to it, I can hear the snare sounding rather thready. That comes from too much of the bottom mic in the mix. The second is a tom overlay. All right, so let's play all this in the full mix. I think probably the first thing that's obvious is the toms have got a lot of low energy, starting to muddy up the track. So we'll solo that, bring on the EQ. Toms, that low energy tends to be like around 130, 140 most of the time. See, if I go too high, it still exists down here. If I go too low, I'm killing the fundamental, which just makes it boring. So it's like around 130 to 140. And it's just a matter of deciding how much I want to reduce. Back to the full mix. Let's settle on that for right now. All right, drum kit. Let's go to the busiest area. What I hear here is the kick doesn't have a whole lot of punch. The kick drum already appears to have enough attack, so I could derive some punch. First of all, I'm going to just mute all of these for now on bypass. So, punch. 60? 60-ish, something like that. It sounds pretty good. I don't want it to be too wide or else I'm going to get muddy in around this area. So somewhere in there is good. Now, I also hear the snare drum. That. It's the snare and the kick causing a lot of muddiness. And this is about 160. So a little reduction. And as you can hear, if I bypass it, the result after gain compensation is I'm starting to hear more of this threadiness, the high frequencies. So I want to duck that a little bit. And again, I'm going to search for that. Too low, too high of a frequency, trying to find that sweet spot. And it's pretty similar to most other percussion. It's around 5K. And then just a matter of finding how much to reduce. Let's go to the full mix. Obviously, that's not enough reduction. That's too much. Let's settle on that for now. All right, let's listen to the full track again with no EQ on anything. And now I'm going to engage all of the EQ that we applied today on percussion only. Bypass. And engaged. I hope this tutorial has helped some of you understand the possibilities of shaping your MIDI percussion tracks to create a better mix. Again, I'm only focusing on EQ solutions in these videos. There are other solutions that I'm hoping to convey in the future. Look out for the next corrective EQ videos for other instrument groups including winds, brass, and strings.